Hey guys! So we're gonna start a new chapter book called Tuesdays at the Castle. This is definitely a fantasy. And what happens in this story is that, well, I'll read you the back. Meet the castle that can build itself, and the children who will do anything to defend it. Tuesday at Castle Glower is Princess Seely's favorite day. That's when the castle magically grows a new room. A turret, or a turret is like one of the towers, or sometimes an entire wing. No one knows how or why the castle does it, and no one except Princess Seely has ever bothered to map out the castle's many twists and turns. But when the king and queen disappear, and counselors from neighboring kingdoms arrive to advise the three Glower children, even the castle seems to know that something is wrong. Take the new tower room, which is stocked with mysterious objects and has a knack for appearing just when Seely needs it. Then there's the secret passageway that leads the children to a room the counselors don't want them to know about. To find their parents and hold on to their kingdom, Seely and her siblings will need all their ingenuity, Seely's maps, plus some help from their beloved castle before it's too late. So there are people from neighboring kingdoms who are basically trying to take over because their mom and dad, the king and queen, are missing. And the castle and the kids are trying to keep that from happening. Chapter 1, Tuesdays at the Castle. Whenever Castle Glower, that's its name, became bored, it would grow a new room or two. It usually happened on Tuesdays when King Glower was hearing petitions, so it was the duty of the guards at the front gates to tell petitioners the only two rules the castle seemed to follow. Rule 1. The throne room was always to the east. No matter where you were in the castle, if you kept heading east, you would find the throne room eventually. The only trick to this was figuring out which way east was, especially if you found yourself in a windowless corridor or the dungeon. This was the reason that most guests stuck with Rule 2. If you turned left 3 times and climbed through the next window, you'd end up in the kitchens, and one of the staff could lead you to the throne room or wherever you needed to go. Seely only used Rule 2 when she wanted to steal a treat from the kitchens, and Rule 1 when she wanted to watch her father at work. Her father was King Glower the 79th, and like him, Seely always knew which way was east. And also like him, Seely truly loved Castle Glower. She never minded being late for lessons because the hallway outside her room had become twice as long, and she certainly didn't mind the new room in the south wing that had a bouncy floor, even if you could only get to it by climbing through the fireplace of the winter dining hall. King Glower, the 79th, on the other hand, valued punctuality and didn't enjoy being late for dinner because the castle had built a new hallway, that ran from the main hall under the courtyard to the pastures, and all the sheep had wandered inside to chew the tapestries. He also didn't particularly like waiting for hours for the ambassador of Bensway, only to find that the castle had removed the door to the ambassador's room, trapping the man inside. Of course, the king had to admit that there was usually some strange logic to the castle's movements. The ambassador of Bendeswy, for instance, had turned out to be a spy. And the sheep, well, that had all been a mere whim, but there was still logic to be found if you looked hard enough. King Glower admitted this freely, and he made it clear that he respected the castle. He had to, otherwise he would no longer be king. The castle didn't seem to care if you were descended from a royal line, or if you were brave or intelligent. No, Castle Glower picked kings based on some other criteria all its own. Seely's father, Glower the 79th, was the 10th in their family to bear that name, a matter of tremendous pride throughout the land. His great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather had become king when Glower the 69th's only heir had turned out to be a nincompoop. Legend had it that the castle had repeatedly steered the old king's barber to the throne room via a changing series of corridors, always, for days until the royal council had him declared the next king, while the young man who should have been Glower the 70th found himself head down in a haystack after having been forcibly ejected from the castle through the water closet. King Glower the 79th, lord of the castle, master of the brine sea, and sovereign of the land of Slynn, knew when to leave well enough alone. He married the beautiful daughter of the royal wizard when the castle guided them into the same room and then sealed the doors for a day. He paid attention when the castle gave people larger rooms or softer chairs. When his older son, Bran, kept finding his room full of books and astrolabes, like star stuff, while his second son, Rolf's bedroom, was moved next to the throne room, King Glower sent Bran to the College of Wizardry and declared Rolf his heir. And when little Seelie was sick and the castle filled her room with flowers, King Glower agreed with it. Everybody loved Seelie, the fourth and most delightful of the royal children. Chapter 2. Everyone hates me, Seelie grumbled. No one hates you, her sister Lila said soothingly, but you do have a tendency to bounce. There's nothing wrong with bouncing, Seelie insisted. Very true, her brother Rolf said, coming into the room. Let's bounce right now. Grinning at Lila in a way that was sure to irritate her, he took hold of Seelie's hands and they began to jump up and down in place. Seelie forgot to pout and laughed as they jumped. Rolf could always make her laugh. Lila tossed her dark hair to show Rolf that he was being silly and went to the window to look out. They were in Lila's room, which was quite large and grand, and straddled a narrow bit of the north wing. There were windows on one side that looked out on the main courtyard, and on the other side was a balcony that hung over a sort of atrium with a fountain in the center of it. Lila was at the courtyard windows, checking on their parents' travel carriage, which was being stocked up with lap rugs and novels prior to the king and queen taking a journey. Seelie stopped jumping. Done then? Rolf collapsed on Lila's bed, knocking several of the many small cushions onto the floor. You do like to bounce, don't you, Seal? Not anymore, Seelie muttered. I'm going to have to start climbing through that fireplace into the new room, Rolf went on, not having heard her. Get in some practice. He held his chest and panted. Seelie watched a trunk the size of a coffin being carried out by two burly footmen and loaded into the luggage cart that waited beside the carriage. It would indeed be a long journey her parents were taking, and they weren't taking her with them, which is why she had been in the throne room, getting underfoot until Lila had lured her upstairs with the promise of caramel apples. And there's no caramel apples, she griped. Caramel apples? Rolf leaped off the bed. Where? There will be, Lila said with great patience, once mother and father are gone. Cook said we could make them ourselves tonight after supper. Excellent, Rolf said. I do like a caramel apple. Also with chocolate on. And cinnamon sugar. He rubbed his hands together eagerly. He was tall and blonde with endearingly crooked front teeth. Seelie, who was also blonde, but small, she was only just 11, gave her brother a dark look. I'd rather go with Daddy and Mummy, she said, knowing she sounded like a brat. But if you just want to fill your stomach, you can stay here. Cecilia! Lila's voice was sharp. She was tall, and when she stood shoulder to shoulder with Rolf, their resemblance to the king and queen was both striking and intimidating. You know very well that we cannot go to the College of Wizardry, so there is no need to be rude about it. I know that Rolf can't go, Seelie grumped. Her tutor had explained that a king and his heir never traveled together in case of an accident. But I don't understand why I can't go and see Bran graduate. Because Father said no, and Father is the king, Lila said. Well, it's a silly reason, Seelie said, knowing that she sounded even more childish, but not caring. She ducked between them and out of the room. She paused for just a moment in the hallway, but she heard Lila say, "Oh, let her go, Rolf. She's determined to be difficult." So Seelie stomped off down the hall. She found some stairs and climbed them, and then a hallway and more stairs, and just kept going. She didn't have her atlas with her, and wasn't sure she'd ever seen this particular staircase, but she was trying too hard to hang on to her disagreeable mood, and told herself she didn't care if she got lost. An atlas is like a book of maps, and she has made a book of maps for the castle, showing where all of the paths and hallways and rooms are in the castle, but she doesn't have it with her, so she doesn't know where she's going. Not that she'd thought she'd get lost. All of the royal children knew the rules very well, and besides, it was fairly obvious that the castle liked them. But Seelie was trying to make an atlas of Castle Glower, the first ever, and normally carried colored pencils and paper with her to sketch anything she hadn't seen before. So far, she had 300 pages of maps and could get to most of the major rooms, winter and summer dining halls, chapel, library, throne room, in record time as long as the castle wasn't bored and looking to stretch. But all she found at the top of the stairs was a small, round room. Still, she didn't want to stomp back down the stairs just yet, so she stayed to explore. The room had windows that looked in all 4 directions, and she could see the mountains around Castle Glower's small bowl-shaped valley. There was a gold spyglass mounted in each of the windows. It's like a telescope. You know how in the old days they'd have that long tube that they'd look through? That's a spyglass. She peered through the eastern spyglass and saw the slopes of the Indigo Mountains, dotted with small villages that were populated mainly by goat herds. She looked to the south, where the main road wound between the mountains towards Selene City, where the College of Wizardry was. It made her sad all over again, so she turned to the center of the room. The only thing in the room, other than the spyglasses, was a large table with some things scattered across it. She found a coil of rope, a book, a compass, and a large tin that proved to be full of hard ginger biscuits. Seelie took one of the latter. That means the biscuits. It was the kind of sweet that often got passed around at midwinter when guests would show up unexpectedly and cook didn't have time to make fresh biscuits. How long have these been here? Seelie frowned at the biscuit. She had nearly broken a tooth biting into it. It could have been there for 100 years and would probably be edible for 100 more. She went to the window and tossed it down to a flat section of roof a little ways away. It broke into pieces, which some sparrows pounced on and then twittered off a moment later in disgust. She looked down onto the main courtyard and saw her parents standing before the travel carriage. Rolf and Lila were there, and the steward and others of the castle staff. Oh no! Her parents were leaving, and she wasn't there to tell them goodbye. She had thought about hiding until they left to make them regret leaving, but now she wanted very badly to hug both her parents. She raced out of the room and looked down the twisting staircase in despair. She leaned against the wall, suddenly tired from all the emotions of the day, and realized that she was leaning against another door. Had it always been there? It was narrow, and she pushed it open listlessly, certain that it would just prove to be a small cupboard. And then she would have to hurry even faster to catch her parents. But, to her delight, it was a slide. A stone slide that curved down facing the path of the staircase. Seelie sat at the top, tucked her skirts around her knees, and pushed off. The slide curved and spun, and Seelie laughed as it whizzed her down through the castle and deposited her right at the edge of the courtyard, no more than a dozen steps from where her parents were standing. Celie scrambled to her feet and tidied her gown and hair, not sure if her parents would be angry with her or not. She had been hanging around the throne room and their private chambers all morning, hoping that if she got in the way often enough, they would relent and take her along. Finally, her father had yelled to Lila that she needed to do something with that little sister of hers. "Come here, darling," said Queen Selina now, holding out her arms. Celie ran to her mother and hugged her tight. The queen always smelled like strawberries, and everyone said that she was as beautiful at 40 as she had been when the king had married her, tall and slender and stately with her long dark hair pinned up with gold combs. She wore a travel dress of soft green that set off her eyes. "I'll miss you," Celie mumbled into her mother's waist. "I'll miss you too," said the queen. "I'll miss all my darlings. But we won't be gone long. We're just going to see Bran graduate, and then we'll all be home again." "Bran too?" "Bran too," Queen Selina assured her. "He will be the new royal wizard when we return." She smiled sadly. The old royal wizard, her father, that's the queen's father, had died 2 years before. Then the queen turned Celie around and pushed her gently toward the king. King Glower was trying to look stern, but his face soon melted and he held out his arms to his little girl. "Come on then, Celia Delia," he said. Celie jumped into his arms and buried her face in her father's neck. His travel robe had a fur collar and it tickled her nose. "I still want to go," she said. "Not this time, sweetheart," her father said. "When you are older, I will take you to Selene City to see all the sights." "I could see the sights now," Celie said reasonably, "with you and Mummy and Bran." "Another time," her father said. He set her down on the cobbles and disentangled her arms from his neck. "Besides, the castle needs you. I wouldn't want to make it angry by taking you away for too long." "Oh, pooh." But Celie couldn't help being a bit flattered. She liked to imagine that the castle really did like her, and it was nice that her father had noticed. "Besides, somebody's got to keep me in line," Rolf said easily, putting an arm around her shoulders and drawing her to his side. "Don't worry, Mother," Lila said, kissing the queen's cheek. "I'll look after both of them." Celie and Rolf shared an eye roll. They knew what that meant. Lila would act queenly and matronly by turns and order them to eat in the summer dining hall in full court dress every night. Means that they have to eat fancy. But she'd also admonish them to constantly eat their vegetables and not slurp their soup. Celie wondered how long it would take her parents to reach Selene City, see Bran graduate, and bring him home. More than 2 weeks of Lila's mothering, and they should all run mad. Means go crazy. By now her parents were in the carriage and waving, and the carriage was moving out of the castle gates and down the long road to Selene City. They waved until the luggage cart and the ranks of soldiers on horseback blocked the royal traveling coach from view. "All right, both of you," Lila said briskly. "Back into the castle. It's a bit chilly out, and I don't want you to catch cold." "Lila," said Rolf. "Yes, dear?" "Tag, you're it!" Rolf whacked her on the arm and took off at a run. Lila shrieked in outrage, but Celie didn't wait around to see what happened next. A well-played game of tag could go on for days in Castle Glower, but Lila had been known to cheat. We're ready for chapter 3, but we're going to stop for today. So if you like the beginning of Tuesdays at the Castle, keep listening because it gets even better. See you later.